Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 8th of November 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Garish. With him in the studio, of course, is Mike Robinson. Well, yesterday we were really getting into the depths of how bad it is in the United Kingdom these days. We were talking about brutal heavy-handedness by the police in relation to the fracking demonstrations, and a man was arrested after being accused of being mentally ill for standing in the road.
That's right. Now, before you go on, Brian, I'll just mention that anybody that's watching this on the UK Column live stream on the website, there's something coming up immediately after this programme that is related to that, so stay tuned immediately after.
Stay tuned. Okay, well, this needs to be talked about because, of course, we're seeing increasingly heavy-handed behaviour by the police, but we also pointed out yesterday that Theresa May has been the mastermind behind creating a Stasi state in UK, creating the multi-agency public protection arrangements, the multi-agency support hubs. And here we see the police now being linked in with social services and with mental health services. Well, it didn't take long. Somebody sent us through this email. I'll leave it on screen, and of course you can always pause your screen after the programme to read the detail. But this is to say that a gentleman called Eugene Lukyanenko was arrested at 2:30 on Tuesday. What's his crime? Well, this is another man, another parent who's been prevented from seeing their child by social services, in this case Medway Council, and his 15-year-old son is in care, in inverted commas. The son wants to come home to his father, who's a concert pianist, but social services are keeping the boy. And of course, the more the father protests and tries to get contact with the boy, the more the draconian British state is coming down on him. So we haven't had an update as to whether the gentleman's been released, but this is the state of Theresa May's Britain in 2017. Your children or your child can be taken by the British state, and if you then protest and attempt to get contact with those children, you are put into prison. This is worthy of Eastern Europe back in the communist days, Mike.
Well, it is because, of course, while people are experiencing this in real life, in Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is where the government sits, the Office for National Statistics is pushing out the latest well-being statistics for Britain, and apparently we're feeling particularly well at the moment. Well-being has increased, apparently, since we've decided to leave the European Union. We now have a happiness score of 7.52 out of 10, which is up from 7.46 in June 2016. So you'll be glad to know that, Brian.
So we're getting happier under the Conservative dictatorship.
We are absolutely getting happier, according to the Tories. Now, on a more serious note, of course, this is very important for the government that they run these surveys and get these statistics, because they want to make a judgment on how well they are doing at managing people's angst, perhaps, is that the right word, or people's
distress,
disgust at what they're doing. So that these surveys are very important for the government, but nonetheless
we're happier.
We are happier, so that's good. But perhaps one person who isn't happier, as everybody will be aware, is Priti Patel. And thanks to Alex Thompson, who I believe will be with us tomorrow instead of today. He not feeling a bit under the weather today, so he'll be with us tomorrow. Alex sent me this through earlier this morning, exclusive from the Jewish Chronicle. Number 10 knew about Patel meetings. This is relating to the new revelations of meetings that Priti Patel apparently, according to the British mainstream press, had not informed Theresa May that had taken place in Israel. So obviously we know that some meetings took place while she was on holiday, in inverted commas, in Israel, but apparently not all were disclosed. But the Jewish Chronicle saying that, in fact, Theresa May did have all the meetings disclosed to her, and between them they made the decision that they would not admit to certain meetings in case that embarrassed the Foreign and Commonwealth Office.
So Which way do we come in here? Is Theresa May not in control, or is this actually that we have to go to the Israeli government to find out what's really going on inside Westminster these days?
A bit of both, I think. I think that there's no question that Theresa May is not in control. Boris Johnson is not following the party line. He's doing his own thing. Priti Patel clearly working with Boris, and utter chaos. Lack of leadership, no control. People on the radio this morning suggesting that if Theresa May had demonstrated more control over her cabinet, that this type of thing wouldn't have happened. It seems that in these days of Brexit, when we want to make no progress at getting out of the European Union, we've got to generate as much chaos within the cabinet as possible. Yes.
Well, we'll be coming back on to chaotic aspects of UK, but of course one area where Theresa May has not been chaotic is in her clampdown on any accusations that we have paedophile rings operating in Westminster. And what's been happening over the last few days, we've been calling it Kneegate. So apparently now anybody who's been naughty inside the building of Westminster, touching of knees or making hurtful comments, these people have now got to be rooted out. So this is a fairly typical headline from a couple of days ago. Commons leader was told about criminal probe into Westminster researcher, but took no action. This is another story about nothing, that somebody made an inappropriate advance to somebody else. At the time, nothing was done. Now, all of a sudden, it's become very important and is pushed in front of the public that we should pay attention. We've got this one. This is the Telegraph, obviously. Former MP Commissioner lied in VIP child abuse interview. This is so fascinating in that we can come in and see that basically it's about what was said during a public appeal for information back in December 2014. A senior Met detective described the allegations by a child abuse survivor, Nick, as credible and true. But when he was speaking on LBC radio, the Met Commissioner said, let's get this right, the investigation will focus on comments he made during a broadcast on LBC radio in September 2015, in which he insisted he had not approved the use of the phrase credible and true, and it had actually been an unfortunate slip of the tongue by a senior detective. So this says all back in 2014, it was the slip of the tongue over credible and true. Now this is all stirred up in front of the public. It's all about that nasty child abuse, which was all nonsense. But I did pick up this bit in the article because it said, strangely enough, but after 2 years and more than 2.5 million, the Met was forced to apologise when it had merged the claims were allegedly false and malicious.
That's an interesting statement.
So we have a whole article that a man called Nick made allegations that were false, but when the Telegraph prints this article, it has to put alleged in front of those allegations. But if they were false allegations. Why do they have to put alleged in? I think because the Telegraph knows there's every danger that those allegations were not false, and of course Nick's allegations were not investigated properly.
So this is alleged news then?
This is alleged news. This is spun, but it's getting serious because local papers were reporting yesterday that this gentleman was found dead. Ex-Welsh Minister Carl Sargent found dead 4 days after being sacked over shocking and distressing allegations. Now, what's shocking and distressing about the allegations is that nobody knows what the allegations are. So he was removed from cabinet, and he was trying to clear his name, but the exact details of the allegation was never made public. And this is very common now in local authorities, Mike. We've had it operating in the NHS. Somebody is accused of doing something wrong. They don't know what they're supposed to have done, and they don't know the name of their accuser. And certainly there was a hospital consultant in Derriford Hospital in Plymouth that was suspended for many months, never knowing what he was accused of. He was found innocent ultimately, but embedded in the article here in the Independent is just more clickbait to get you having a look at the fact that there's now big trouble with all of these naughty people doing naughty things, nobody focusing on the real issue of the deep child abuse. And the Daily Mail, I'm afraid, has won a very poor prize over this because have a look at how they report things. Chief Constable who investigated Edward Heath over child abuse claims is set to quit with a £2 million pension. What do you think of that, Mike?
I think it's a complete lie.
Okay.
Because later in the day, all the mainstream media had this rubbish, these types of headlines, set to quit with a £2 million pension. Of course, it's not a £2 million pension, it's a £2 million pension pot. But aside from that, he's not going to quit because he released a statement in the evening. Clearly, the mainstream media didn't bother to get in touch with him. He released a statement after these articles were published, and it said, "I've been with Wiltshire Police for coming up to 13 years, and my commitment to the force I lead and the communities we serve is as strong today as it has ever been. Indeed, my passion and enthusiasm for policing remains equally high as it was when I joined the service some 33 years ago. The suggestion that I'm about to quit the force is simply not true. I remain fully committed to Wiltshire Police and I'm exceptionally proud to serve as Chief Constable." So, Brian, the question in my mind is this some kind of placed story within the mainstream media, effectively making a threat against him, against his pension? Is that what?
Well, he's had other threats. He's had other threats, and allegedly, we had the Attorney General taking a visit to suggest that this Chief Constable should drop his investigation. Have a look at the picture there of Mike Veal. He looks a bit pensive, well, you might say, a little bit concerned. And the reason is that, of course, he's been investigating this lovely old man. Notice the picture of very smart Sir Edward Heath. This wonderful old gentleman's not done anything wrong. And if you think I'm sort of making this spin up, well, have a look at the other picture that the Mail used. This is deliberate, absolutely deliberate. But it gets more interesting because Robert Green's been in correspondence with the Mail. This is a letter he's had back from one of the editors, Peter Wright. It says, "Dear Mr. Green, thank you for your letter about Edward Heath and the BBC's Tim Fortescue interview, which Paul Dacre has passed to me. I've seen the interview, which has been widely reported, including 3 stories on the Daily Mail website, one in 2014, 2 more in 2015. It is, of course, hard to tell from the interview whether Fortescue was speaking metaphorically.
No, it isn't.
Or referring to specific cases. If he was still alive, I'm sure we would want to interview him for the Daily Mail, but sadly he died in 2008. On your more general point, of course, the lesson of Savile case is that allegations of sexual abuse must be properly investigated. At the same time, there's always a risk of false allegations, and I'm sure you would agree the police must take care there is no presumption of guilt, as the collapse of Operation Midland demonstrated. Mr. Veal has given assurances his investigation is objective and proportionate, and we look forward to that being confirmed when he eventually publishes a report." So this is an apologist letter, isn't it, Mike?
Absolutely.
It's an apologist letter. And of course, when the report was published, the Daily Mail attacked Mike Veal. This is a brilliant letter. We're a little bit short for time, so I'll leave it with a pause on screen for people to read. But essentially, a lady has written into Paul Dacre challenging the paper on what they've been writing. The headline is "Open Letter, the Establishment's Attempts to Prevent Inquiry into a Possible Westminster Child Abuse Ring." As reported in today's edition of your paper, the Damage Limitation Initiative in response to Wiltshire Police inquiry into Edward Heath rolls on apace. Yeah. A really powerful letter. We're going to say to the lady, well done for doing it. And we're also going to bring up the Private Eye article. This is the one we showed yesterday, where sneering at the whole idea that children could be abused in a ritualistic setting, they decided to attack Robert Green, and also they bring in David Icke. So this is sneering. If you imagine if you're a survivor of abuse and you have to read this Private Eye article, you've suffered the abuse, and now here are people laughing at you. It's just outrageous. And what we pointed out was that, of course, publicly there is story after story of people convicted for the ritualised abuse of children, but for Private Eye, it's all a big joke. Robert Green has had to take on the editor of Private Eye, so on screen is an email that's been sent. He begins, "Dear Mr. Hislop, I've not yet received any response to my email of the 3rd of November with regard to the wholly offensive article relating to me inaccurately and primarily smearing Chief Constable Veal over Operation Conifer." Robert then gives the details of his conviction because, of course, Private Eye reported that inaccurately. "To begin with, I was convicted unlawfully on a breach of the peace after being arrested and charged on the 12th February 2012 for breaching an interlocutor, Scottish version of injunction, that had never been served upon me. That fact has now been accepted by the Court of Session. Moreover, the Scottish Government was found to have been in breach of its commitment to the European Court for Human Rights in denying me the legal support of a solicitor at the time. An estimated 76,000 others have suffered the same fate, as ruled by the Supreme Court." He then goes on to the Reins list, and he asks Mr. Hislop whether Hislop was aware that 2 journalists associated with Private Eye were on that list. So we wait to see whether Mr. Hislop will continue to be smiling after that particular communication.
Yes. Now, North Korea.
Well, it's all cartoon, really, Mike.
Well, let's have a look and see how cartoon it is, because the Foreign Office was pushing this out today. And I'm just going to say that unfortunately there's no dialogue with this, but we wanted people to get an impression of how cartoon-like this was. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, this video lasts about 58 seconds, so you may want to skip past some of this audio. So taxpayers' money well spent there, Brian.
Well, this is cartoon propaganda, isn't it? Where's the evidence? Where's the detail behind this cartoon statement that we should be wrecking another country's economy because the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, that apparently doesn't know what its own diplomats are Priti Patel doesn't know what its own diplomats are doing, are saying that we've got to bring in these sanctions against North Korea in order to stop the nuclear weapons program that we still have no detailed evidence of. But where would that cartoon have been appropriate? The Simpsons, I think.
But this is even insulting to the Simpsons.
Probably is. But this is now the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. It's not pretty.
Well, in the meantime, Donald Trump has arrived in China, of course, and the Western establishment absolutely hysterical about whether anything productive is going to come out of this meeting. Perhaps I'm quite sure North Korea is going to be discussed, but of particular concern is that the United States would actually want to get involved with China economically. Well, let's leave it to the Council on Foreign Relations to give us just a typical example of this, what China wants from Trump. A lot of excitement and feelings that this meeting could be historic and significant, and then it goes on to basically disparage the whole thing. Well, you know, I do recommend people read this just for the comedy value alone. The headline on the Foreign Affairs article is "What China Wants from Trump." Go and have a look at it, but we wait to see what comes out of the meeting in China.
Will be interesting to see.
And in the meantime, well, Boris Johnson has gone to the United States because Trump's not there, of course. So he's hoping to get some influence while the boss isn't at home, sort of thing. But back here in Europe, NATO is working hard and apparently is reorganizing itself because of this nasty Russian threat. And here's our new defense secretary at his first sort of official meeting. He turned up to the ministerial with the other NATO leaders, and Jens Stoltenberg had quite a lot to say in the run-up to this meeting. Of course, he's the Secretary General of NATO. He said that NATO is going to revision the command structure. Revision the command
It's an
structure.
interesting new speak term, of course.
Yes, and this will include a new command to help protect the sea lines of communication between North America and Europe, and another command to improve the movement of troops and equipment within Europe. Our ability to move forces is essential to deterrence and collective defence. But this was the key thing that I thought he said. We need civilian government cooperation to overcome administrative hurdles such as customs rules, because you don't want customs getting in the way of moving troops and material, right? So, Brian, this is the revisioning of NATO with European Defence Union in mind, in my opinion, because, of course, to get past these potential customs problems, well, if you have a defence union, you remove those completely.
Well, we've got the trade aspect there, Mike, but the other thing I pick up on is that they're suddenly talking about protecting the sea lanes between the United States and Europe. Why am I interested in that? Because, of course, this used to be one of the fundamental roles for the Royal Navy. We had the ships to do it. We had the ASW carriers. They've been sent off and scrapped. We had the Nimrods. They've been scrapped. We had the submarine fleet. They've been scrapped. So David Cameron's government in particular has scrapped all that RN capability, Royal Navy capability to protect those sea lanes. Now all of a sudden we're saying we need to protect them. Does that indicate that they're now thinking that if they started a war in the east of Europe, we need to get those American supplies in? Because the protection is not for day-to-day trade. The protection, primarily the key protection was to protect the American industrial military might, bringing in all the supplies that would be needed to fight a major war in Europe.
World War II style convoys.
On a far greater scale.
Yes. Yeah. Well, in the meantime, of course, NATO doing its best to destroy Afghanistan once again. They're claiming that since they stopped operational activities in Afghanistan, that the situation has got worse with the Taliban resurgent and ISIS activity and so on. So really the best thing to do is to stick even more NATO personnel back into Afghanistan. They're going to lift the numbers up from 13,000 to 16,000. There will be more troops, said Stoltenberg, and we're focusing on training Afghan special operations forces, which have proven so key to fight against the insurgents. So this insurgency continues, and of course, while it continues, drug production continues to go through the roof. So that's a win-win for everybody.
Everybody's happy, but that's of course what the survey said. More drugs, more happiness.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Matt Hancock was in Paris yesterday for a conference at the British Embassy in Paris. Now, we all know what happened the last time the government ministers were, taking part in affairs at the embassy in Paris. We had the Franco-British Council plan to destroy Britain's military capability.
We are still the only media outlet to have discussed this in detail, Mike.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting.
Well, Hancock actually was there to discuss cybersecurity and perhaps a forthcoming Franco-British pact on that, because of course with our new national cyber innovation centres and GCHQ Cyber Accelerator and all the various other GCHQ stuff, in fact we probably need to be partners with the French on this, because we have a long historical ties with that country, don't we?
According to David Cameron, and of course...
I was under the impression we were at war for them for most of our history.
Not according to David Cameron. They've
Right.
been traditional friends for several hundred years.
Right, okay. Well, in the meantime, the rhetoric on Russia continues, and Matthew Rycroft was pushing this out. This is from the UK at the United Nations. Well, let's just have a look at what was said, because it's quite spectacular.
Russia is trying to shoot the messenger to cover up for the crimes of the Syrian regime. And to the Syrian government, I say that evidence has been carefully gathered of the inhuman crimes you have committed. Russia is protecting you, for now, but the day will come when you are held accountable for your actions before international law, and your victims will get the justice that they deserve.
What do you think of that?
Well, my reaction to that is those are exactly the words I would use to accuse the British government of starting the violence in the first place. So it's almost a mirror there. But to see that young man in his slick suit threatening another country, when we've got the record at home of abuse of children, and we've got a record overseas of helping the flow of drugs from Afghanistan, and we've got the war in Iraq, which was, of course, on the lie of weapons of mass destruction, and we've got the destruction of Libya and the destruction of Syria. The comments obscene. Absolutely obscene. Well, we'll leave it to Vladimir Putin to get closer to the truth here. He was speaking at an arms export commission in Moscow yesterday, and he said that, you know, the Russians, yes, they sell weapons. It's a multi-billion-dollar business for Russia, but he insists that the bottom line never first comes the stability of the regions that the weapons are being delivered to, and he's saying that that is in absolute contrast with what some actors in the arms market are doing. Instead of a genuine fight against terrorist groups, we see a simulation of this fight. While uncontrolled arms deliveries grow, one day the weapons go to so-called moderate opposition in this or that place, and the next day they're in the hands of radicals and terrorists. It appears that the conflict zones have become for some just a lucrative business, a link in the chain of grey schemes of supply of arms to nations and regions suffering from military and political instability. Now, undoubtedly, we are merely mouthpieces for Putin by reading that, notifying people that he said that. But frankly, he's bang on the money with it, isn't he? Well, I think so. And he comes across as a statesman. When I come back in my mind to what the young man said there in the United Nations, or I listen to Theresa May or David Cameron or the rest of the British politicians, I don't believe a word they say. You hear Putin talking, he's analytical, he's not using prompts. And the evidence that we're getting is much of what he's saying is true. So, interesting state of affairs. Well, of course, one of our big military companies is Rolls-Royce. And if you remember back to January this year, they were in a little bit of trouble because they had to pay penalties, fines, I can't remember, the deferred prosecution agreement, that's the term, £670 million plus interest and costs to avoid prosecution over allegations involving Indonesia, Thailand, India, Russia, Nigeria, China and Malaysia, and corruption in arms deals with those countries. So that was £670 million then. Unfortunately, they're in trouble again because this is the Department of Justice in the United States who have decided to bring criminal charges against 5 Rolls-Royce employees involved in an alleged bribery scheme to help them win energy contracts in Kazakhstan. I wonder if there's BBC Media Action in there trying to sell it for them. I'm not sure. These are new charges, and so far, 4 of the 5 have pled guilty. And so we wait to see what happens with the other one. But in the meantime, guilty pleas already put in place. Yeah, deferred. I think that's a good system, isn't it? You defer charges against you. Well, the way it's supposed to work is you defer the prosecution, and the company is supposed to agree to pay a fine and then to follow certain terms and conditions following that. But as we discovered with the deferred prosecution agreements with the banks recently, I think it was HSBC in the United States, the terms and conditions which are set by the court, there's no way to follow up whether those terms are actually being met or not. And when one mortgage holder in the United States took
HSBC to court to try to get the evidence that they were actually following the terms set under the agreement. The court simply refused to permit that. So the companies continue to be protected by the courts in many cases.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got the blockage on child abuse investigations in UK. We've got the rise of EU military unification, which of course sucks in British troops, although we've supposedly got Brexit. We've got the UK threatening nation states to behave themselves or else. What's really going on in UK itself? Well, we're going to come back to big society. And we'd like to thank a lady called Kate who sent in an email containing this. I'll just read a little bit of it. But she starts off by talking about common purpose being a legal doctrine that imputes criminal liability on the participants involved in criminal activity for all that results from such activity. And the point she's making is that the phrase common purpose has a position at law in that you can be convicted of common purpose which results in a criminal activity. But the reason she's put that in, presumably, is because she's seeing the charity common purpose, something completely different, but it has the same name, coming up in relation to Uprising, which apparently is a national youth leadership development organisation. And it says we're recognised at government level as a pioneering charity championing the critical issues surrounding diversity, social mobility and equality. The mission is to break the cycle of unrepresentative power in the UK by developing new community-minded and socially conscious leaders so that our future decision makers truly represent our diverse communities. We want to change the face of power in this country, quite literally. And they call themselves Uprising, Mike. With a name like that and an agenda as blunt as that, shouldn't they be on one of the lists for potential domestic extremists?
I would have thought Prevent might have been interested.
One would have thought that. So we're going to thank the lady very much for sending that in to us. What did we do? Well, of course, we went to the website to see for ourselves what sort of things were being talked about. And my goodness, it was a fascinating trail. So lots of very, very glossy images. Here's Uprising. You can see the logo top left, developing the leaders of tomorrow. The first thing that came into my mind is that the young lady there has got a headscarf on, Mike. We're not seeing the BBC climb all over this organisation because they're demeaning ladies who want to wear the hijab in this photograph. Indeed. So clearly this organisation must be approved by the BBC. Well, we can bring up a little bit of about us because that's always good. We've heard about the National Youth Leadership Organisation. And it says our programmes run in London, Luton, West Midlands, Cardiff City region. That's an interesting expression. Greater Manchester. We've also worked in Merseyside, Bedford, Tamworth, Lichfield, Stoke-on-Trent, Blackburn. And we've a growing movement of 3,300 Uprising alumni who importantly remain involved in their community and with our work. That's fascinating, isn't it? So they've admitted that they want to change the face of power in this country. There's nothing mentioned here about democracy, but you're putting 3,300 activists in amongst communities to do our work. Fascinating stuff. Let's have a look at this bit here. We go on to history and purpose. It was born in East London in 2008. And we started life as a small pilot project under the wing of the Young Foundation.
Of course.
And it was started to help identify and support a new generation of talented adults from diverse backgrounds. Now, you picked up on the Young Foundation there, Mike, because, of course, we've seen the Young Foundation at the back of common purpose activity and also at the back of big society.
Just about every change agent organisation seems to have funding from the Young Foundation.
From the Young Foundation, and a gentleman called Jeff Mulgan was one of the key players in very close to the Cabinet Office. Well, they want to change government. Who wants to change government? Well, none other than David Cameron. Just quite extraordinary. Here he is. And there's a series of videos. Nick Clegg is another one of the supporters of this organisation. and Miliband as well, but decided to have a look at David Cameron. We haven't got sound on this, but you don't really need it. What was he having to say? Well, towards the end of this, he says that basically, I promise you that I will do everything I can to support you in the months and years ahead. He's talking about this particular charity because the principles that have guided this organisation have never been more important in Britain. The idea that it's not where you were born or who your parents are that matters. It is who you are and what you can do for our country.
Yes.
So
Whose country?
Well, this is the key thing, their country. It doesn't matter whether you were born here, and that doesn't impinge on what colour you are or what religion you are, but according to these people, it doesn't matter whether you were born in UK, it doesn't matter whether your parents were born in UK, it doesn't matter whether your parents or grandparents might have died fighting for this country, that doesn't matter. You've just got to be acceptable material for this new organisation supported by David Cameron in the background.
I mean, it was David Cameron that started using the phrase "our United Kingdom," and I always wondered what was in his mind when he said that. I mean, I have suspicions, but
yeah. Well, this is what most people have forgotten about, is that the Conservatives unleashed the Big Society programme, and that Big Society programme has never gone away. In fact, it is expanding under the surface, and of course Uprising is one of the organisations creating the so-called social change agents who are driving change which has never been discussed in Westminster, has never been put to the British public, and has never had a democratic vote on it. So if you don't know what Big Society is about, you can go on the UK Column website, just Google Big Society, and you will come up with some of the articles that have been written. But we had a little look at the people involved with this organisation. MPs, some of them, so-called business leaders, people with very high-level financial influence, local authority leaders, the great and the good. Don't know how these people got there, but these people have put themselves forward to say they're going to change our society as they require. There's not going to be any vote on it. So no democratic mandate for changing the face of power in this country. Many would call this sedition, but it's a charity and David Cameron backs it, so apparently it's okay. We were fascinated to find this lady embedded in it. If I get her name right, it's Rushanara Ali, MP. She's the co-founder of Uprising, apparently, and she's also founding chair of 1 Million Mentors. And that brought into my mind 1 million change agents, Mike, which of course we know is being used to pull the NHS apart. So the Young Foundation backs this organisation. If you're not familiar with the Young Foundation, I would encourage you to go and have a look at them, because this is another Quango foundation, heavily politically involved to change society as they require, not the way that a democratic vote would change it. But one of the names that immediately came back up in looking at the Young Foundation was this gentleman, Danny Kruger. And for those of you not familiar with this man, he's been involved with a lot of these organisations, but of course he was one of the big advisors to the Conservative Party, and he came out with some statements fairly recently which we'll bring up on screen. But here it says he's the founder and former chief executive of 2 charities, Only Connect, a criminal justice project, pity that can't get involved in child abuse, and the West London Zone for Children and Young People, a place-based early intervention project. But of course his power base comes from the fact that he was special advisor to David Cameron as leader of the opposition. So it's all getting a bit incestuous now. And if I can bring him in on screen, this is the bit we need to remember, that he was the man who said that the Conservatives plan to introduce a period of creative destruction in public services.
I think we're seeing that, aren't we?
We are seeing it. And of course, he wasn't the only person to know what was really going on. because Nicholas Bowles MP said this: the Prime Minister and his deputy Nick Clegg want their people power revolution to unleash chaotic effects across local communities. Chaotic, therefore, in our vocabulary, is a good thing. And of course, Nick Clegg is also involved with Uprising. So this is the destruction of democracy in UK being carried out by charities and foundations and ultimately big banking money with the full support of former politicians. I'll just bring this headline in to say, well, it's not just us seeing what's going on. Britain has voted for chaos, and we've also got mention of chaos here with these key articles. So what's the ultimate plan? Chaos and breakdown in order to bring in a new society.
Now, can I just say that you are being rightly vilified in the chat box for using the G word?
For using the G word?
Yes, you must search. You must not Google. You
must search.
Other search engines do exist. Anyway, of course, what you're saying is, what you're talking about is big society, and a parallel policy agenda with big society is the city's agenda, the breakup of national government in this country, and devolved administrations, not only in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but also in the so-called city regions. And this is an interesting little article from the Centre for Cities. The UK's metro mayors have changed British politics in just 6 months. So this is apparently a kick-off of their new Metro Mayor blog series, so that's very good. They say that since the election of the Metro Mayors, they have changed the landscape of British politics, offering a voice for urban Britain, which had previously been missing, and taking tangible steps to improve the lives of the people living and working in their city regions. And they say that when leadership from central government has been sorely lacking, the mayors have stepped into the breach in moments of crisis, most notably in the aftermath of the Manchester bombing and the Borough Market terrorist atrocities, and the Grenfell Tower disaster, apparently, because Sadiq Khan is doing a really fantastic job, apparently, for the people of Grenfell. How many people have still not been rehomed? I believe it's something in the region of 95% of them are still not in permanent accommodation. So Sadiq Khan doing a fantastic job there and really demonstrating the beneficial effects of metro mayors. But anyway, the article goes on to say that significantly, the 6 metro mayors have also shown a willingness to work beyond party political lines in order to learn from each other and to get the best deal for their city regions. This was illustrated last week when the metro mayors came together with Sadiq Khan to call for more powers from central government.
So they are now getting rid of the politics aspect. You're just going to have a mayor.
Just the dictatorship.
You're just going to have a dictatorship, a fiefdom based on a mayoral system in each city.
That's right.
Region.
But what staggered me was that the example this guy gives for them working together is when they're making a power grab from central government. So of course they're going to work together for that. But let's see them work together for something productive, if they ever do anything productive, which I haven't seen any evidence of so far. And it says to build on these foundations, next month, the Centre for Cities is holding the first ever International Metro Mayors Summit in London, bringing the UK mayors together with counterparts from US cities to discuss the challenges they face and so on. The point is, this is a global agenda, and who is in partnership for this particular event? Well, of course, Citibank. I don't think we need to say any more than that, but don't worry, it's getting better, because Glasgow it has become a world-leading smart city. The government is really proud of what it's done with Glasgow. Scotland's biggest city, they said, is to reap benefits worth nearly £150 million, and that follows £24 million investment from the UK government into digital infrastructure, open data, making Glasgow the world's leading smart city. And of course, this is the point. It is all about open data and snooping on people, effectively. That's all it's about. They say 24 million invested in the city since 2013 through Innovate UK, funds projects that connect the city together and help Glasgow save money and energy and develop the technologies of the future. No, it's only developing data gathering projects and how we actually
can be watched and tracked, and every aspect of our lives known by a team of people run by the city mayor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's in front of our very eyes when we know where to look for the evidence. But what we've got forming in UK is a dictatorship. It's coming in very quickly. And of course, we can now see the objective under this smokescreen of chaos is that democracy is being completely ripped apart. If you'd like to do something about it, it's not watching UK Column that counts, it's what you do with the information. And we hope very much that you'll be spreading the information, encouraging other people to watch UK Column and getting out there to challenge people who can do the right things, particularly when enough pressure is brought on them. And on that line, perhaps people might like to communicate with Private Eye to express their opinion or perhaps disgust at the way Private Eye is laughing at the abuse of children or adults who have been through the horrors of ritualistic abuse. But of course, if people do nothing, things will continue. And for the curious, I'll just say that the colours purple and green are very interesting and are appearing on more and more websites. We believe that the purple represents the colour of kings, so this is giving acknowledgement to the power base, and green is the colour of renewal. So make of that what you like. You can search on the internet using an appropriate search vehicle.
Indeed.
That's our news for today. We'll be back same time tomorrow, hopefully with Eastern Approaches with Alex Thompson. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.